Good morning, everyone, and imagine two worlds. In one world, God is perfect. Every action he takes is flawless, unquestionable, and always right. In the other world, God is sometimes wrong, capable of mistakes, emotion, and regret. We on the government side believes that the second world is better because it is more human, more compassionate, and far more loving. A perfect world may seem peaceful, but it takes away human freedom, curiosity, and emotional depth. An imperfect world, on the other hand, allows people to question, to learn, to grow, not through fear, but through faith and understanding. When we can see flaws in someone divine, it teaches us humility, love, and the courage to keep improving. Our world embraces imperfection as not as a weakness, but as true foundation of moral strength and emotional connection. Let me explain two arguments in my speech. The first argument of the government team is that there is room for moral debate. In our world where God can make mistakes, people have the space to question, to challenge, and to think critically about morality. They can discuss about what is right or truly wrong, instead of blindly accepting divine commands. In a perfect world, there's no need for moral reflection, because everything that happens is already right. That might seem peaceful, but it kills growth and independent thought. If God can never be wrong, then humans can never be right on their own. They just obey. But when God can sometimes do wrong, humans are invited into the conversation of ethics. They must learn, reason, and make moral choices through the understanding rather than fear. Now compare the two worlds. In opposition's world, faith becomes blind obedience. People follow rules without questioning, but in our world, faith becomes intelligent and emotional understanding. People explore ideas of justice, fairness, and goodness for themselves. For example, in Greek mythology, the gods were powerful but imperfect. They felt jealousy, anger, and sadness. Humans questioned those actions and learned from them. This questioning didn't destroy faith. It made humans wiser and more self-aware. Moving on to the second argument of the government team, and it claims that yes.
You said they want human gods, but we have many humans around us to learn from. Why do we need the gods to be like human too?
Okay, I can't understand your question.
So you said that they want human. What? They said that they want humane God, but we have many humans around us to learn from. So why do we need the God to be like human too?
Gods are the ones who are inspirational and they can influence us because by the years, tradition has influenced us so that we can be inspired by the God saying. Moving on to the second argument of our team. Our second argument is that a world with an imperfect God reduces fear and builds courage. In a world where God is always right, people live under constant judgment. Every mistake feels like a sin and every failure feels like a crime. That kind of pressure creates fear, guilt, and blind obedience. For instance, when Job faced temptation in the desert, he experienced hunger, weakness, and death. That story comforts believers because it shows that even a divine being can struggle. It tells us that strength is not about failing, it's about standing back up. In our world, people don't worship perfection. They learn to embrace growth, courage, and forgiveness. That kind of faith replaces fear with hope and the judgment with understanding. In conclusion of my speech, to compare both worlds at one time, the opposition's perfect world is peaceful but lifeless, full of rules but empty of meaning and growth. Our imperfect world is messy but beautiful, full of mistakes, and also full of love, freedom, and compassion. That is why the government side proudly believes that a world where God sometimes does wrong things is far better, wiser, and more human world. For these reasons, proud to propose. Thank you.
Everyone, if God could make mistakes, the road would become unsafe and confusing. We would never know what is truly right or wrong. That is why we would rather live in a road where God is always right, a road guided by fairness, stability, and faith. Let me first rebut the proposition. My first argument is that the perfect God keeps the road fair and safe. If God can sometimes do wrong things, then incorrect people could suffer for no reason. Imagine if a child dies. Or a kind of person is punished just because God made a mistake. That would be terrifying and unfair. Taking an example of just Japanese Shintoism, syntactic gods make mistakes a lot, and people do not stand up and solve their problem when the gods are sloppy and grumpy. Let's say a river overflowed and the village was swept away. People understand that the god of the river, most likely a dragon, got really angry for a very trivial reason. Say the girl who was offered as a sacrifice wasn't pretty, and there is nothing people can do about it. Uh, in a world where God, it's so sad and unfair. In a world where God is always right, we can trust that everything that happens for a reason, even if we don't understand it now. That trust keeps people calm and strong even during hard times. Uh, it gives them the confidence that justice will always win in the end. People want such sense of justice. Uh, My second argument is that a perfect God gives people peace and hope. Many people turn to God when they are sad, scared, or lost. They find comfort not to worry and to be lost faith. They wouldn't know if they could trust Him anymore. Let me rebut the proposition. They said creativity thrive in in an imperfect world. However, in fact, and in a world where God is wrong, people would spend time fixing disasters instead of creating art. Uh, true creativity grows in peace, not in a chaos. Um, and, um, God, but in a world where uh, they said suffering becomes meaningful. However, uh, even in a perfect world, people still experience pain and sadness, but they find hope because they believe there's a reason for it. Um, for grow, suffering is a chance to grow, and something that can bring people closer together. If God can be wrong, the pain has no purpose at all because we can't be sure it will ever lead to good. It becomes random, cruel, and hopeless. In conclusion, we believe that a world with perfect God is a world with trust, safety, and hope. This is the world we choose. Thank you.
Honorable adjudicator and full components, the government side believes that we would rather live in a world where God sometimes does some things wrong than one where God is perfect. In my speech, I will provide one argument. I'll start with the argument. Argument 3 of government side is why an imperfect God creates a more human and inspirational faith. When God is capable of mistakes, he becomes more human and people can relate to him. Faith becomes a relationship based on understanding rather than fear. In our world, believers do not feel detached from God. They see his moments of error, doubt, or frustration and recognize that even divine beings experience the same emotions that humans feel. This makes faith stronger because people connect to a divine figure that mirrors their struggles rather than standing infinitely above them. It allows them to see goodness as something that grows through effort, not as something only perfect beings can possess. In the opposition's world, when tragedies strike, believers often lose faith because they feel that God has betrayed them. If God is perfect and yet allows pain, people see this as a sign that he does not care. In our world, people understand that God can make mistakes. When terrible things happen, they do not immediately lose faith. Instead, they learn to forgive, to adapt, and to seek meaning in their experience. This creates a redemptive relationship between humans and the divine, one that is based on reflection and healing rather than guilt or blind obedience. In our world, people can take greater responsibility for their choices. They cannot simply justify actions by saying that God is always right. Instead, they must think critically and decide what is morally correct through reason and empathy. This makes morality more active and yes.
So you said people can feel closer to the God if God is imperfect, but how can you look up and worship someone who is as childish as you?
So my argument is not about respecting God as much. Mine is saying that my argument is about showing compassion to other people. Showing that God becomes more human, relatable, and inspiring. Because God is capable of error, humans can relate to him and realize that even God can make mistakes and
POI.
You can't POI immediately. Continue. By contrast, in the opposition's world, morality becomes passive. If God is always right, people stop questioning or reflecting. They justify harm, discrimination, and suffering by claiming that everything happens for a divine reason. This turns faith into a tool of control rather than source of growth. In our world, people do not see imperfection as a weakness. They understand it as a natural and necessary part of life. When people believe that even God can make mistakes, they become less judgmental and more compassionate toward others. They view moral progress as a journey that includes errors and redemption. This understanding creates a culture of empathy and cooperation. People are kinder because they recognize that moral strength comes from continuous effort, not from flawless obedience. The opposition may argue that our rule creates confusion because morality loses a fixed point. However, morality already evolves with time as human societies learn and grow. Believing in an imperfect God allows that growth to occur honestly and openly. The worst case scenario for our side is that some individuals may lose belief in God entirely. Even though that outcome is not harmful. When divine stories lose their meaning, people instead look to human moral models who demonstrate kindness, fairness, and justice. So adjudicator, what have I told you today? I gave you my arguments, which was why an imperfect God creates a more human and inspirational faith. For these reasons, the motion should be passed. Thank you.
Second speaker of the opposition, I will continue to show why a perfect God creates a better, safer, and more meaningful world. First, let me rebut the proposition. The second proposition said that the proposition think people do not need to respect God. Then what's the point of having God? And also, they said that free will. They talked about free will and moral growth. Humans grow stronger when they can question God. But we agree that humans should learn and grow, but we don't need a wrong God for that. People can still make choices, face challenges, and learn lessons within a perfect world. Even when God is always right, humans still have freedom because we can choose how to follow his perfect example. Also, if God can be wrong, then our moral lessons become uncertain. If we cannot trust that God's actions are good, how can we ever know that good truly means? Moral growth needs a clear and perfect guide, not a confusing or changing one. We don't need a broken God to be better humans. We grow up by following perfection, not by watching mistakes. Moving on to my argument. So before I explain my arguments, firstly, I would explain what a role model of God on our side is. So on our side, a God is kind, perfect, and from this people respect and try to follow this. And what if God was wrong? What will happen on proposition side? People say that it's okay to do bad things and affect others because God may be wrong. So is it okay to let people do this? Is it appropriate for us? If only God was perfect, this confusion and mystic role model will disappear. So my first extension is that a perfect God preserves morality and goodness. Our ideas of right and wrong come from believing that God is perfect. If God can make mistakes, then even moral rules can change. People could say maybe lying is fine, maybe hurting others is okay, because even God might be wrong. It's okay to steal, it's okay to kill others, and it's okay to cheat if God may do so too. But when God is always right, morality stays clear and strong. People know what kindness, honesty, and fairness mean. Not because they're forced to follow, but because they trust in God's perfect goodness. A perfect God gives humans a shining example of what it means to be good. He is like a light that never goes out, guiding people through darkness. When God is perfect, goodness never disappears. When My second point is that a world with an imperfect God would fall into confusion and chaos. If God can sometimes do wrong things, then who decides what's right? Different people might follow different ideas, and the world would break apart. Some would obey God, others would reject him, and there would be endless fighting and doubt. In a world where God is always right, everyone can share the same truth. There is unity, stability, and peace. People can build trust with one another because they know that the foundation, God's justice, never changes. A perfect God unites the world. An imperfect God divides it. So in conclusion, we believe that a perfect God is not a limit. He is our foundation. He keeps the world moral, united, and full of hope. A world with an imperfect God may sound free, but it would quickly lose truth, trust, and peace. And note that on our side, people feel respect and try to follow this. And however, on the proposition side, people say that it's okay to do bad things and affect others because God may be wrong. So that is why the opposition proudly stands for a world where God is always right. Thank you.
The whip I'm the whip speaker of government, and our team firmly believes the motion that this house would rather live in a world where God is imperfect rather than when God is perfect. And I'll start my speech with my rebuttals. Firstly, I will rebut to the opposition's argument about safety and ease. We do know that a perfect God looks safe and feels safe, but it is different from each perspective. So, so if there's a flood, people or a natural disaster, people would think and fear God. But we can't assume that after this disaster, people will still assume that God is always perfect. Also, other team said that confusion disappears. We rebut to this. We can't just assume that people would not be good if God is imperfect. So people still have the reins. They can still think what is right or wrong. So we think that is not true. Moving on to my speech, at the end of this debate, the key question is not whether God exists, nor which religion is true. Both sides agree that people in both worlds believe in a divine being. The real issue is what kind of belief system creates a better moral world. One where morality is shared, reflective, and compassionate, or one where it is absolute, unquestionable, and rigid. Our side stands world where that is more human, inclusive, and capable of growth. Yes?
God flooding the world and endangering so many species because he had some terrible misunderstanding. That sounds like God becomes Godzilla.
I do not understand your POY. I'll keep moving on to my speech. A world where God sometimes does wrong things. This version of God produces more meaningful faith, more accountable institutions, and more resilient societies. The opposition, in contrast, defends a world that relies on a perfect God and a fixed moral order. But this leads to blind obedience, moral stagnation, and exploitation by those who claim to speak for divine authority. In the opposition's world, morality is defined by perfection and obedience. They believe this produces stability and order. However, perfection is not the same as goodness. It removes the need for questioning and prevents humans from developing empathy or accountability. In our world, morality is defined by reflection and moral responsibility. Faith is dynamic and participatory. People must think, evaluate, and decide what is just rather than merely following what they are told. This makes our world not only fairer but also kinder, because compassion comes from understanding imperfection, not from enforcing perfection. The government bench has shown that an imperfect God does not weaken faith but strengthens it. When God can make mistakes, the relationship between humanity and the divine becomes unbalanced. Beliefs do not see God as distant ruler, but as a moral companion who understands struggle, doubt, and growth. This creates redemptive faith that can heal, adapt, and endure tragedy. When bad things happen, people do not immediately lose hope. They interpret suffering as a part of an imperfect but meaningful world that allows change and learning. In contrast, the opposition's world, tragedy destroys faith. If God is perfect and yet allows injustice, believers feel abandoned. When their perfect God fails to meet expectations, faith collapses entirely. Our world prevents this by allowing believers to grow through imperfection, turning loss into moral strength. Our world produces people who think critically, emphasize deeply, and understand what moral growth is, a lifelong process. Their world produces followers who obey without questions. The difference is between living morally and merely following moral orders. This is why I'm very proud to propose. Thank you.
Flooding the world and endangering so many species because he has some terrible misunderstanding that sounds like God becomes Godzilla. Does that mean that in Proposition's world, humans must fight God? We must defeat the God who created the world. Is that the learning we need? We opposition believes that people still deserve a reliable and good God because they need a moral guidance. Proposition. They said suffering becomes meaningful, not meaningless. However, this idea sounds nice, but it misunderstands faith. Even in a perfect world, people still experience pain and sadness, but they find hope because they believe there's reason for it. When God is perfect, suffering is not meaningless. It's a chance to grow, and something that can bring people closer together. If God can be wrong, the pain has no purpose at all, because we can't be sure it will ever lead to good. It becomes random, cruel, and hopeless. When God is perfect, pain has purpose. When God is wrong, pain has no meaning at all. They said freedom and creativity thrive in an imperfect world. However, we agree that creativity is important, but it doesn't disappear in a perfect world. Perfection doesn't mean nothing changes. It means everything develops in the best way possible. Humans can still create music, art, and technology, but inspired by love, beauty, and peace, not by pain and mistakes. In fact, in a world where God is wrong, people People will spend time fixing disaster instead of creating art. True creativity grows in peace, not in chaos. A perfect world inspires creations through joy, not through suffering.
POI.
No, thank you. These are free and moral growth. However, people can still make choices, face challenges, and learn lessons within a perfect world. Even when God is always right, humans still have freedom because we can choose how to follow His perfect example. They said love and faith are more meaningful when God can be wrong. However, living a perfect God doesn't make it less real. It makes it safe and eternal. People love God not because they must, but because they are grateful for His goodness. If God can be wrong, faith would break easily because no one wants to believe in a God who might hurt them unfairly. Thank you for listening.
This debate is that a perfect God is needed for people to have a perfect guide. We don't need a broken God to be better humans. We grow by following perfection, not by watching mistakes. Perfect God is the best way to guide people. People love God because they trust goodness. So our first clash is about which side better guides people. On proposition side, they attract people to bad and different directions. Only because gods have mistakes and gods are wrong. They attract people to go to different directions. They allow people to do bad things and affect other people. However, on opposition side, we have the perfect role model that people can follow. And it is appropriate for our daily lives inside society. So note that we don't need a wrong God for people to grow for people to grow. We need a perfect God that follows people into a better direction and into a better direction and a safe direction.
POI.
No, nothing. No. So people love God because they worship the perfect God's true goodness. So on proposition side, all is misleading, and we have the best solution to fix this problem that we have. Thank you.
Government side's claim is that if God is sometimes wrong, it helps humans in various ways. Government side believes we won because in government's world, people accept each other and consider kind people to be role models. Why? Because since God also makes mistakes, people accept that even God is imperfect and they consider each other to be just as good as God. And therefore, the most kindest, the best people in those crowd of humans would be considered role models. So in our world, since kind people are the role models, the best people are the role models, and they accept each other, our world will be much kinder and better overall. While in the opposition's world, because the God is always correct, the people would not consider kind people or the good people as role models, and the people would only think about God to be their role model and the person they should all be. Since every human is worse or not as good as God, they might even have a low self-esteem. So, therefore, the government's world is better than the opposition's world, and for these reasons, the motion should be passed.